Today, we are going to learn other ways of expressing the frequency of our actions, besides the adverbs we already learned in Unit 16. Let's begin with expressions of frequency, using times. When expressing the idea that something has taken or takes place several times, we add the word times to a number, and then refer to a period of time, like a day, a week, a month, or a year. Now, look at how they are used with the word times and a number. 3 times a day, 5 times a week, 4 times a month, 10 times a year. Let's take a look at other common expressions of frequency. If we want to say something occurs 1 or 2 times in a period of time, we say once a week or twice a month. To say something occurs daily or monthly, you can say every day or every month. You simply add the word every before the period of time you're referring to. And if it is a specific day of the week, you would say every Sunday, every Monday. Now let's learn the correct way of using expressions of frequency in sentences. As you learned in Unit 16, adverbs of frequency such as always, sometimes, never, go between the subject and the verb. Look at this example. I always go to church on Sunday. But other expressions of frequency go at the end of a sentence, like this. John goes to the cinema every Saturday. Let's see some other examples. I drink coffee 10 times a day. Rita teaches English 5 days a week. We have a party once a month. She plays tennis twice a week. We eat caviar once a year. They go to the dentist every 3 months. I read the newspaper every day. John goes to the cinema every Saturday. Now, let's revise how to make questions with how often. To ask about the frequency of an action, we use how often. Let's see some examples of how to use how often. How often do you drink wine? How often do you go to the dentist? How often does she come here? To answer these questions, you would use a frequency adverb or expression. Look at this other question. Do you often go to the museum? How would you answer? If you do, you would say, yes, I do. And if you don't, you would say, no, I don't. I have a question for you. How often do you study English? Well, in this class, you have revised the grammar in Unit 103 of our complete course and learned about some expressions of frequency. Enjoy Unit 103 and meet Steve and Marcia. Find out how often both Marcia and Steve go to the hairdressers.
Today, we are going to start to learn about the impersonal pronoun it. Let's begin by looking at how to form expressions with it. It is a very common word in English, and it has many uses. We commonly use the word it to refer to things and animals. Let's look at some examples using it. Where is my watch? It's on the table. This is my new car. Do you like it? Easy, right? But there are also many other ways to use the word it. Let's look at using it with time and date. As we saw in Unit 9, it is also used to tell the time. For example, what time is it? It's 20 past 5. Is it late? It's 2:45. So it's easy, isn't it? And just like we use it for time, we also use it for days of the week and dates. Let's look at these examples. What day is it today? It's Wednesday. It's the 15th of December. It's my birthday today. It's simple. But wait, there are even more ways of using the word it. So let's look at using it in other forms. Let's look at another way to use the word it. Okay. It can also be used when we describe actions using the infinitive form of the verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. It's wonderful to be in love. First of all, we have the impersonal pronoun it, then we have the adjective wonderful, which is describing the action. And lastly, we have the verb to be in its infinitive form. Okay, great. Let's take a look at a couple more examples just to be sure. It's expensive to travel to Japan. It's dangerous to drive fast. It's simple, right? Let's continue by looking at other uses of it. As we saw in Unit 79, it can also be used with sense verbs. You remember them, right? For example, you could say, it sounds great. It looks okay to me. It's easy, right? Now I promise just one more use of the word it before we finish. We use it to refer to people in telephone conversations. For example, if someone calls you on the telephone, you would normally ask, who is it? And then they would respond by using it like this. It's Jack here. Now we have finished. Well, in this class, you have revised the grammar in Unit 104 of our complete course and learned how to form many expressions with the impersonal pronoun it. Enjoy Unit 104 and meet Paul and Rosemary. Find out why Paul's birthday is very special.
Today, we are going to continue learning about the impersonal pronoun it. Let's start by revising what we have learned so far about the impersonal pronoun it. In Unit 104, you learned that it is a very common word in English, and it has many uses. You learned how to use it to refer to things and animals. For example, this is my new car. Do you like it? And you also learned how to use it with times and dates. For example, what time is it? It's 20 past 5. What day is it today? It's Wednesday. It's the 15th of December. It's my birthday today. Today, we are going to look at other expressions with it. Let's continue by looking at how to use it with to take and to last. These two verbs can be combined with it to express the length of an action. Let's see a few examples with the verb to take and then an example with to last. It takes 2 hours. It doesn't take long. How long does it take by plane from Paris to London? How long does it take you to go to work? It takes me about 20 minutes. It lasts 1 hour and a half. Be careful. Do not mistake the verb to last for the adjective last. Look at these examples of the adjective last. The last in line. The last time. Now, let's look at the expression, it's time. This is a very useful expression in English. it can be used followed by a verb in the infinitive. It's time to go. It's time to buy a new car. It's time for us to talk. It's time for the children to go to bed. And it can also be used followed by a verb in the past to make suggestions or recommendations. It's time you bought a new watch. It's time we left. It's time he got his haircut. It's time I had a holiday. Now we'll look at it to refer to distances. Look at these examples of it to refer to distances. How far is it? How far is it from the airport to the city center? It isn't far. It's about 8 kilometers. Is it far away from your house? Yes, it's a long way from my house. We use the comparative form longer to refer to time and further to refer to distance. For example, how much longer is it to London? How much farther is it to London? Finally, let's look at it to talk about the weather. To talk about weather conditions, we use it with the verb to be and an adjective. For example, it's cold. It's warm. It's windy. It's sunny. It's foggy. It's cloudy. As we saw in Unit 37, it's also used with the present continuous. For example, it's raining. It's snowing. Well, in this class, you've revised the grammar in Unit 105 of our complete course and learned more about the impersonal pronoun it. Enjoy Unit 105 and meet Irene and Alfred, who have just met on a train from Oxford. Find out how much they have in common.
Today, we are going to learn how to use also, to, and so to say as well or in addition to. Let's begin by looking at using the words also and to. The word also goes before the main verb and after the verb to be. For example, he's Spanish. I'm also Spanish. And the word to goes at the end of the sentence. For example, I am Spanish too. It's simple, right? Look at this other example. She speaks Spanish. I also speak Spanish. Or I speak Spanish too. And another example. They'll be in London in June. We'll also be in London. We'll be in London too. Okay, now we'll move on to using the word so. The word so can be used followed by an auxiliary verb and the subject to mean also. For example, he's Spanish. So am I. Look at other examples. They're tired. So are we. He's a student. So is she. I'm from Melbourne. So is he. In these examples, we have the verb to be, which is also an auxiliary verb, in the first sentence. However, if we do not, we will have to use the auxiliary do for the present, did for the past, and will for the future. For example, I work in a bank. So do I. We use do with so because the main verb of the first sentence is to work, and it is in the present. Now, let's look at more examples with also, to, and so. They live in London. We also live in London. We live in London too. So do we. I listen to jazz. I also listen to jazz. I listen to jazz too. So do I. Now, remember that in the third person singular, do changes to does. For example, I play the guitar. He also plays the guitar. He plays the guitar too. So does he. You want a coffee? She also wants a coffee. She wants a coffee too. So does she. Okay, so now let's look at using so in the past and future. As I have already said, when we use the word so in the past, we use did instead of do. And in the future, we use will. For example, we went to the mountains at the weekend. So did we. I failed my exam again. So did I. He will come here when the match finishes. So will Bill. July will be hot this year. So will August. It's simple, isn't it? So now let's move on to using so with modal verbs. The word so can also be used with the modal verbs such as would, must, can, and could. For example, we would like the red wine. So would we. I must go to the hairdresser's. So must I. Sally can play golf. So can Jane. I could walk when I was a year old. So could I. It's easy, right? And before we finish, let's look at some other forms using so. In the first person singular, it is possible to say, so do I. So did I. So will I. So can I. But these phrases can also be replaced with a simple me too. In addition, the word so can be used in short answers. For example, I think so. I hope so. I'm afraid so. Well, in this class, you have revised the grammar in Unit 106 of our complete course and learned how to use to, also, and so to say as well or in addition to. Enjoy Unit 106 and meet two friends, Jill and Andrea. Find out why Jill thinks she is better than everyone.
Today, we're going to learn about neither and either. Let's begin by looking at how to use them. Neither is a combination of not and either. It is used with the verb in the affirmative. For example, he isn't English, neither am I. But either needs the word not in the sentence. For example, he isn't English, I'm not English either. Let's look at examples of neither and either with the verb to be. Look at these examples using both neither and either. She isn't very well. He isn't very well either. Neither is he. You're not listening. You aren't listening either. Neither are you. We aren't comfortable. I'm not comfortable either. Neither am I. Now, let's see how to use neither and either with other verbs. Other verbs that aren't the verb to be need the auxiliaries do and does when used with neither and either. For example, they don't like fish. We don't like fish either. Neither do we. Here are some more examples. He doesn't speak English. I don't speak English either. Neither do I. I don't sing very well. She doesn't sing very well either. Neither does she. Now, we'll continue looking at examples of neither and either in the past and the future. We use the auxiliary did in the past and will in the future with neither and either, in the same way that we use the auxiliaries do and does in the present. Look at these examples. We didn't go to the mountains at the weekend. Neither did we. I didn't pass my exam again. Neither did I. He won't come here until the football match finishes. Neither will Bill. April won't be very warm this year. Neither will May. Let's look at some examples of neither and either with other modal verbs. Look at these examples with would, must, can, and could. We wouldn't travel in this weather. Neither would we. I must not forget my hairdresser's appointment. Neither must I. Sally can't play tennis very well. Neither can Jane. I couldn't swim until I was 10. Neither could I. I will give you a very useful tip before moving on to something different. Note that in the first person singular, instead of neither do I, neither did I, neither will I, we can use a simpler structure. Me neither. Speaking of useful tips, now we'll look at short answers in the negative. In Unit 106, we saw that we can use the word so with different verbs to make up short answers in the affirmative. For example, he's a student, so is she. You want a coffee, so does she. In the negative, there are two different forms of short answers using so. The first one uses so plus verb in the negative. For example, I think so, I don't think so, I believe so, I don't believe so. And the second one uses verb in the affirmative plus not. Look, I hope so, I hope not. I'm afraid so, I'm afraid not. Finally, let's look at other short answers. There is a simple way to show agreement or disagreement, as well as expressing differences or similarities. We can use short responses like these. I'm English. I'm not. I'm not Spanish. I am. We're students. We aren't. We aren't teachers. We are. Easy, right? We just use a personal pronoun and the verb to be in the affirmative or negative. Look at these other examples. I like opera. I don't. I don't like flamenco. I do. He drives fast. She doesn't. We don't drink wine. We do. We saw the film. We didn't. He didn't like the party. She did. I can see it. I can't. She can't dance salsa. He can. As you have seen, we can also use other auxiliaries or modal verbs. Well, in this class, you have revised the grammar in Unit 107 of our complete course and learned about the words neither and either, and lots more. Enjoy Unit 107 and meet Harold and Ruth. Find out the effect Ruth's red low-neck dress is having.
Today we are going to learn how to use the expression, why don't? Let's start, though, by revising how to use why and because. We already studied how to use these two words in Unit 22. Remember that we use why in questions and because in answers. Let's see some examples. Why are you in bed? Because I'm not feeling well. Why are you drinking water? Because I don't like wine. Why is she crying? Because her dog is ill. Why are they in Paris? Because they're studying French art. All these examples are affirmative questions, but you can also make negative questions. Take a look. Why aren't you watching the film? Because it's too violent. Making negative questions is not complicated in spoken English. You just need to use the auxiliary in the negative contracted form. Now, let's look at why don't to make suggestions. To make suggestions when you yourself are included, you can use the word why combined with the word don't, which is the contraction of do not, and the first person plural we. Look at these examples. Why don't we go to the cinema? Why don't we have dinner at home tonight? Why don't we go to London for our holiday? Remember that in order to form questions in English, we put a question word and an auxiliary before the subject. Let's see more examples. Why don't we go another day? Why don't we go for a pizza? Why don't we get married? Why don't we change the time of the meeting? We also use why don't to give advice. We can also use why don't to give advice. In this case, we use the second person you. Look at these examples. Why don't you ask her? Why don't you see a dentist? Why don't you relax and forget about it? Why don't you apologize? Why don't you talk seriously? Why don't you wait until tomorrow? It's easy, isn't it? Well, in this class, we have revised the grammar in Unit 108 of our complete course and learned how to use why don't. Enjoy Unit 108 and meet Stephen and Samuel. Why don't you find out what kind of business they're talking about?
Today, we are going to learn about the past continuous. Let's start by revising the present continuous. In Unit 37, we learned about the present continuous. It is used to talk about actions and situations that are going on at the moment of speaking. For example, she is going home. It is raining. Notice that it is formed with the correct form of the verb to be in the present and a verb in the ing form. In the negative, we only need to add the word not after the verb to be. Look at these examples. I am not working today. He is not playing. And in questions, we just need to put the verb to be before the subject. Look. What are you doing? Who are you calling? Now, let's look at the past continuous. The past continuous is also formed with the verb to be, but this time in the past. Was or were followed by a verb ending in ing. Let's look at how it is for all the persons. I was working. You were working. He was working. She was working. It was working. We were working. You were working. They were working. Now, let's look at the use of the past continuous. We use the past continuous to talk about actions and situations that were happening at a particular moment in the past. Look at these examples. I was working at 9 o'clock last night. At 6 o'clock, she was traveling to Paris. It is also used to refer to a longer action in the past, which is interrupted by a shorter one, which is usually in the simple past. We were watching TV when the phone rang. She was driving when they had the accident. And if two actions were happening at the same time in the past, both will be in the past continuous. While we were playing tennis, Jim was working. You were calling me while I was trying to call you. The past continuous is one of the most important narrative tenses. It is used to describe the situation in which the events of a narrative happened. For example, I was walking along the street one day when I met a man. Two old ladies were sitting on the beach one day. A man was waiting to see the doctor when the door opened. And what about questions in the past continuous? In interrogative sentences, the verb to be goes before the subject. What was she doing when you saw her? Where were they going? Why was he wearing a wig? What was he driving? For short answers, we use the subject and the verb to be in the past simple. Were you working last night? Yes, I was. Was she wearing my ring? No, she wasn't. Were you living there last year? Yes, I was. Were they playing well? No, they weren't. Now we'll look at negative sentences in the past continuous. Negative sentences are formed by adding not after the verb to be. So we have was plus not to make was not, or the contraction wasn't, and were plus not to make were not, or its contracted form weren't. Look at these examples. I am sorry, I wasn't listening. What did you say? It wasn't raining when I came in. They weren't studying English when I saw them. She wasn't enjoying the film. Well, in this class, you've revised the grammar in Unit 109 of our complete course and learned about the past continuous. Enjoy Unit 109 and meet Laura and Max. Find out who Max's unrequited love is.
Today, we're going to learn about the gerund. The gerund is usually formed by adding ing to the infinitive form of the verb. For example, in the infinitive, we have the verb to study, which in the gerund is studying. In English, we use the gerund quite frequently. As you have already learned, it is used in continuous tenses. For example, I am studying. However, it is also used in other ways. Look at these examples. I don't like going to the dentist. Studying English is useful. As you can see, we also use the gerund when the action is the subject or the object of a sentence. Now let's look at more examples of the gerund as a subject. Look at these sentences. Smoking is bad for your health. Skiing is my favorite hobby. Drinking will ruin your health if you are not careful. Sailing was my grandfather's favorite sport. Being famous has its dangers. Smiling only uses 7 muscles, but frowning needs 14. Eating fish is good for the brain. Drinking and driving is very dangerous. Here are some examples of the gerund as an object. I hate waiting in a queue. We really enjoyed watching the match. You'll like visiting India. It's a fascinating country. She enjoyed playing tennis very much in the summer. His favorite hobby was painting portraits. Her speciality is dancing the tango. Well, in this class, you have revised the grammar in Unit 110 of our complete course and learned about the gerund. Enjoy Unit 110 and meet Philip and Henry. Find out what Philip is planning to do during his vacation to Cuba. Today, we are going to learn how to use gerunds after prepositions. As you saw in the previous unit, 110, gerunds are very frequently used in English, and they are formed by adding ing to the infinitive. Look, in the infinitive, we have to say, so the gerund is saying. You also learned in Unit 110 that gerunds are used as the subject or complement in sentences. The gerund is also used after all prepositions. For example, without saying. For instance, he left without saying goodbye. And before going. For instance, last night we had hot chocolate before going to bed. Here are some more examples. He saved money by working as a waiter. You can't combine your studies with playing football. They got jobs as secretaries after leaving school. Why don't you go out instead of watching TV all the time? He made a fortune from investing in coffee. She met a lot of new friends through joining a gymnasium. So, using gerunds after prepositions is simple, right? Now let's move on. Let's look at using gerunds to make suggestions. Can you remember learning the expressions what about and how about? When talking about actions, we must use the gerund with these expressions to make suggestions. Remember that about is a preposition. I will now give you some examples. What about going to a concert? How about telephoning for a pizza? What about playing a game of squash? How about asking Anna to come with us? Okay, so now, before finishing this unit, let's recap what we've learned. The sentence, how about meeting outside the cinema, uses the gerund after the preposition about to make a suggestion. And the sentence is, I don't believe in doing too much exercise. Before having dinner, we went to the cinema. Also use the gerund after prepositions. Well, in this class, you have revised the grammar in Unit 111 of our complete course and learned how to use gerunds after prepositions with suggestions. Enjoy Unit 111 and meet 2 friends, Sunshine and Catherine. Find out Sunshine's secret to keeping her husband very happy. Today, we are going to continue learning about gerunds and look at verbs that are followed by a gerund. Let's start revising what we have learned so far about gerunds. In Unit 110, we were introduced to gerunds and learned that they are used when the action is either the subject or the object of a sentence. For example, studying English is useful. I don't like going to the dentist. In Unit 111, we learned that gerunds are also used after all prepositions. For example, he left without saying goodbye. Today, let's look at verbs followed by a gerund. Some verbs, when followed by another verb, are followed by a verb in the gerund. For example, to avoid. Try to avoid making any mistakes. And to finish. Next week, he will finish dealing with that firm. Other verbs that are followed by a gerund are dislike, enjoy, go on, hate, imagine, keep, like, love, mind, miss, practice, risk, stop, suggest. Let's have a look at more examples of verbs followed by the gerund. We dislike driving in heavy traffic. He enjoyed dancing with them. They went on talking till you begged them to shut up. I hate going to the dentist. Imagine all the people living in peace. Keep taking the tablets until I tell you to stop. Why don't you like being with us? I don't mind waiting a few minutes. She misses living in London. She practiced playing the guitar till she finally learnt. If you drive very fast, you risk losing your license. Stop making so much noise. Now, let's look at expressions that are followed by a gerund. They are can't help, it's no fun, it's no good, it's no use, it's worth. Here are some examples of expressions followed by a gerund. I can't help laughing when I see him. It's no fun being with you anywhere. It's no good taking this exam because I haven't studied anything. It's a beautiful film. It's worth seeing. It's no good calling her. She's out. Well, in this class, you have revised the grammar in Unit 112 of our complete course and learned about verbs followed by a gerund. Enjoy Unit 112 and meet Helen and Anne. Find out whether falling in love is an illness or the most marvelous thing that can happen to someone.
Today, we are going to learn how we use the gerund after a verb and a preposition. We have been learning a lot about gerunds recently, haven't we? So let's begin by revising some of the things we have learned so far about gerunds. In Unit 111, you learned that the gerund is used after all prepositions. For example, last night I had a hot chocolate before going to bed. He left without saying goodbye. And in Unit 112, you learned that there are verbs which, if followed by another verb, are followed by a verb in the gerund form. For example, we dislike driving in heavy traffic. She misses living in London. Keep taking the tablets until I tell you to stop. There are also many verb-preposition combinations that are followed by gerunds. Let's look at the gerund after a verb and a preposition. Look at these examples. I'm thinking of going to India on holiday. They're talking about setting up a company. I look forward to hearing from you. To look forward to is a very common expression which means to think of a future event with positive anticipation. It is very frequently used to say farewell, especially in letters and emails. Let's look at more examples. We're looking forward to seeing you again. We look forward to receiving your order. We look forward to offering you our services. Let's look at some common verb-preposition combinations. In English, it is very important to use the correct preposition. There are verbs that can only be used with certain prepositions. For example, agree with, believe in, feel like, insist on, succeed in, worry about. And these verb prepositions combinations are followed by gerunds. Look at these examples. I don't agree with working at weekends. She doesn't believe in using animal products. We feel like going to a music bar. They will insist on paying for the dinner. He succeeded in crossing the Sahara on foot. Don't worry about finishing the report. You can do it on Monday. Now, let's look at some examples of the gerund after a verb and a preposition. I don't agree with postponing the meeting. She doesn't believe in using animal products. He doesn't worry about making mistakes. I insist on paying the bill. Do you feel like having dinner in a Chinese restaurant? She's thinking of studying art when she leaves school. We're looking forward to moving into our new house. He's always talking about writing a book, but he never does. I agree with working one more day. Do you feel like drinking some wine? He insists on coming with us. She finally succeeded in passing the exam. Well, in this class, you've revised the grammar in Unit 113 of our complete course and learned how do we use the gerund after a verb and a preposition. Enjoy Unit 113 and meet Jerry and Scott. Find out why Scott hates movie theaters. Today, we're going to learn how to use gerunds after adjectives and prepositions. We've been learning a lot about gerunds recently, haven't we? Well, remember that gerunds are very frequently used in English, and therefore very important. So first, we will revise some of the things we've learned so far. Let's revise gerunds after prepositions. In Unit 111, we learned that if we want to use a verb after a preposition, it must be the gerund form of the verb. And guess what? This is a great rule because it has no exceptions. Let's see some examples. He saved money by working as a waiter. Last night, we had hot chocolate before going to bed. Furthermore, in Unit 113, we saw that there are verbs that are sometimes followed by specific prepositions, and if we want to use the verb afterwards, it must also be a gerund. For example, they are talking about setting up a company. I look forward to hearing from you, and today we're going to take a look at using gerunds after an adjective and a preposition. There are also adjectives that are followed by specific prepositions, and therefore, if we want to use the verb afterwards, it must also be a gerund. For example, she's afraid of flying over water. He's good at designing computer programs. We're interested in buying a washing machine. I'm fed up with working here. Let's look at some other adjective preposition combinations. Other frequent adjective preposition combinations are bored with, excited about, fond of, keen on, proud of, tired of. Look at these examples. She's bored with doing the same job, day after day. The children are very excited about going to Disney World. My parents are fond of taking the children to the zoo. I'm very keen on collecting plants. He is very proud of having passed his driving test the first time. They're tired of visiting the same places on holiday. Let's look at some more examples of gerunds after an adjective and a preposition. Here are some more examples of the adjective plus preposition plus gerund. They're fed up with being out of work. We're interested in doing business with you. I'm always afraid of traveling by boat. Her father is very proud of seeing her in the film. We're keen on sailing. I'm fond of walking on the beach. He's bored with always studying the same things. We're all very excited about going to New York. Well, in this class you revised the grammar in Unit 114 of our complete course and learned how to use the gerunds after an adjective and a preposition. Enjoy Unit 114 and meet Jonathan and Albert. Find out all the different ways Albert has tried to give up smoking.
Today, we are going to learn about the gerund with the verb to do. We've already learned a lot about the gerunds and when to use them. In Unit 111, we studied that they are used after prepositions. For example, he left without saying goodbye. In Unit 112, we studied that they are used after certain verbs. For example, he enjoyed dancing with them. And in Units 113 and 114, we studied that they are also used after a verb or an adjective and a preposition. Look, they will insist on paying for dinner. She's afraid of flying over water. Now, we're going to learn about using the gerund with the verb to do. Gerunds can act as nouns, and therefore they can be used with the definite article the. So, for example, the noun of the verb to clean is the cleaning. And you can say, to do the cleaning. This structure is commonly used to talk about housework. Let's look at some more expressions used to talk about housework. Look at the following expressions. To do the cleaning, to do the cooking, to do the ironing, to do the polishing, to do the washing up, to do the washing, to do the dusting. And now we'll apply these expressions to look at some examples of sentences with the gerund and the verb to do. Look at these examples. She does the cooking and I do the washing up. I have done all the cleaning. What I hate most is doing the dusting and polishing. I'm so glad I don't have to do the washing and ironing. Now, let's look at some more common expressions using the gerund with the verb to do. Look at these other common expressions. Garden, the garden, do the gardening. Paint, the painting, do the painting. Shop, the shopping, do the shopping. Now, let's put these expressions into some sentences. How much do you pay him to do your gardening? Notice that we can also use a possessive adjective with a gerund instead of the definite article the. We did all the painting in less than a week. He's doing the shopping. Well, in this class, you have revised the grammar in Unit 115 of our complete course and learned about the gerund with the verb to do. Enjoy Unit 115 and meet Gloria and Debbie. Find out why Gloria's husband Peter thinks of everything.
Today, we're going to learn when to use the verb to do and when to use the verb to make. It is important to notice that the verbs to do and to make have very similar meanings. This makes it difficult to know when to use which. So, let's begin by learning when to use the verb to make. To make is an irregular verb. Remember its three forms: make, made, and made. The verb to make expresses the idea of creation or construction. For example, labels usually say made in Germany or made in Taiwan. And here are some more examples of the verb to make with the meaning of creation or construction. I'd like to make some changes to this design. We made a large profit last year. Have you made any plans for your holidays yet? However, there are exceptions to this rule. For example, we also use the verb to make in many other expressions. Let's look at the verb to make. Common expressions. Here is a list of the most common expressions with the verb to make. To make an appointment. To make arrangements. To make an attempt. To make the bed. To make a complaint. To make an effort. To make an excuse. To make a loss. To make love. To make a mistake. To make money. To make noise. To make a decision. Note that with this last expression, to make a decision, it is also possible to use the verb to take and say to take a decision. Phew! There are a lot of possible expressions with the verb to make, aren't there? Now, let's move on using the verb to do. As we saw in Unit 115, we use the verb to do in most other cases, especially for work and chores. For example, I'll do the cooking tonight, if you like. Could you do me a favor? They've done a lot of research on the new project. What are you doing tonight? I'm not doing anything special. However, as with the verb to make, there are exceptions to this rule. We also use the verb to do in many other expressions. Let's look at the verb to do. common expressions. Here's a list of the most common expressions with the verb to do. To do the housework. To do the cleaning. To do the homework. To do the work. To do a job. To do military service. To do maths. To do something or nothing. To do a favor. To do business. To do a course. To do exercise. To do exercises. There are also a lot of possible expressions with the verb to do, aren't there? Now, we've learned the most common expressions with the verbs to make and to do. Let's finish by looking at the verb to make, extra expressions. Here is a list of some more expressions with the verb to make. To make an offer. To make a phone call. To make plans. To make progress. To make a speech. To make trouble. Look at these two sample sentences. Are they making any progress with that new motorway? Jack always makes wonderful speeches. Well, in this class, you have revised the grammar in Unit 116 of our complete course and learned when to use the verbs to make and to do. Enjoy Unit 116 and meet Stuart and Joseph. Why do they make a good team?
Today, we are going to learn how to form the gerund after the verb to go. We've learned a lot about gerunds so far, haven't we? So let's begin by recapping and doing a quick gerunds revision. In Unit 115, we learned how to use the gerund after the verb to do. For example, to do the cleaning, to do the cooking, to do the dusting. Remember that when using the gerund after the verb to do, the gerund needs to be preceded by the definite article the. However, in this unit, we will learn how to use gerunds after the verb to go, and in contrast, when using a gerund after the verb to go, the gerund does not need to be preceded by the article the. So now, let's look at how to use a gerund after the verb to go. We use a gerund after the verb to go to refer to actions related to hobbies and sports. Let's look at some examples of the verb to go with gerunds. Go dancing. Go shopping. Go sailing. Go skiing. Go fishing. Are you noticing any similarities? Remember, from Unit 110, you formed a gerund by adding ing to the verb. Let's continue looking at a few more examples of gerunds that follow the verb to go. Go swimming. Go jogging. Go skating. Go walking. It's simple, right? Now let's look at how to use the gerund after the verb to go in different tenses. We can also form the gerund after the verb to go in different tenses. Let's look at to go in all its different tenses. Go, went, gone. So let's begin by using the gerund after the simple present go. The children go swimming every weekend. Although my parents are quite old, they go walking every afternoon. Now, let's see how to use the gerund after the simple past, went. We went dancing on Saturday night. She went shopping at 9. And I haven't seen her since Jillian went skating at the ice rink on Saturday. And finally, let's look at the gerund with the past participle, gone. I have never gone sailing in my life. It's easy, right? Now, just one more thing. In addition, we can also use a gerund after the infinitive form to go. Let's look at how to use a gerund after the infinitive form to go. Let's look at these examples and see if you can notice any similarities. Would you like to go skiing next weekend? Would you like to go skating? My husband used to go jogging every morning before he had his heart attack. As you can see, using the gerund is very simple. It is always formed the same despite tense changes. Well, in this class, you've revised the grammar in Unit 117 of our complete course and learned how to use gerunds with verb to go. Enjoy Unit 117 and meet Emma and Allison. Find out why Emma is having such a terrific vacation in San Francisco.
Today, we're going to learn about prepositions used after the verb to go. Let's start by revising the 3 forms of the verb to go: the present, past simple, and past participle. Go, went, gone. The verb to go can be followed by the preposition to, on, and for, depending on what goes after the verb. So, let's start by looking at to go with the preposition to. The most common preposition we see after the verb to go is to. Here are some examples in different tenses. I go to the cinema once a week. I'm going to London next month. She doesn't want to go to work. We went to a restaurant for my birthday. They have gone to the mountains to ski. I went to bed early last night, but I didn't go to sleep until midnight. But there is one exception. Look, he went home after the party. We always say to go home without the preposition to. Now, let's look at to go with the preposition on. We use the preposition on after the verb to go to talk about things like excursions and holidays. For example, they go on excursions every weekend. We're going on holiday next week. She went on a cruise to Greece. My boss goes on trips quite a lot. And the last combination we'll look at today is to go with the preposition for. We use the preposition for after the verb to go to talk about specific activities. These are usually short activities, like to go for a drink or to go for a walk. Now, look at these 2 sentences. I always go for a walk on Sunday. I always go walking on Sunday. As you can see, we can also make sentences without for using the gerund. The gerund is usually used here, however, for longer activities. Here are some more examples. He has gone for a run. He has gone running. The children are going for a swim. The children are going swimming. Let's go out for a drink. Let's go out drinking. Notice that in this last example, we have used the phrasal verb to go out, also followed by the preposition for. In this case, to go out means to take part in social activity outside the home. Now let's recap by looking at some examples of these prepositions used after to go. We went on a cruise to the Caribbean for our honeymoon. They have gone to that new Italian restaurant. I will go for a walk after dinner. I always go to bed early on Sundays. She didn't go on holiday last year. Did you go for a drink last night? He has gone to the dentist's. We won't go for a swim. It's too cold. Well, in this class, you have revised the grammar in Unit 118 of our complete course and learned about prepositions used after to go. Enjoy Unit 118 and meet Anna and Deborah. Find out what they've planned for their long weekend. Today, we're going to learn how to use the verb to get. Let's begin by learning how to use the verb to get and to obtain. Let's start by looking at the verb to get in its three forms: get, got, got. It is important to know that the verb to get has several different meanings. The most common meaning is to obtain. For example, did you get my letter? Where did you get your ties? I'll get the newspaper. How did she get her job? Can you get me a sandwich? That's simple enough, isn't it? Now, let's look at another use of the verb to get. Let's look at the verb to get plus adjectives. When the verb to get is followed by an adjective, it usually refers to some kind of change of state. Let's look at a list of the most common combinations of the verb. To get plus adjective. Get angry. Get better. Get cold. Get dark. Get dressed. Get drunk. Get hungry. Get hurt. Get lost. Get married. Get old. Get ready. Get tired. Get used to. Get wet. So now we know a lot of the most common combinations. Let's look at examples with the verb to get plus adjectives. Don't get angry. It's not my fault. I hope you get better soon. Hurry up. Your dinner is getting cold. It gets dark early in the winter. I got dressed after breakfast. You'll get drunk if you don't take care. I'm getting hungry. Can we eat soon? He got hurt playing baseball. They had a map, but they still got lost. She got married in white. Our dog is getting old. I would get ready if I were you. It's late. I get tired of working with the computer. I can't get used to living in the country. You'll get wet without an umbrella. Well, in this class, you have revised the grammar in Unit 119 of our complete course and learned how to use the verb to get. Enjoy Unit 119 and meet Frank and Cindy. Find out whether Frank has any doubts about marrying Cindy.